from the peak of Mount Wollumbin, the most easterly point of Australia. Welcome to the Freemanity Radio Show with your host, Spread Love, every Monday, 6 a.m. EST. We acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of this land, past and present, to the Minyongbal, Nundawal, and Grakabal people of Bunjalung Nation, and all other mobs across the Red Plains and Mountains on country. Bugler Bear.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Freemanity Show with myself, Spread Love. Yes, how are we today? If you're, just a quick note, if you're listening, Adam, if you could just press mute on Skype, that would be great. Thank you, mate. Broadcasting live, very, very close to the peak of the highest point in Australia on the eastern side, anyway, of Mount Warning. Your Monday night's weekly host, Spread Love, or Monday morning, if you're on the east coast of America. The Freemanity Show, discussing and dissecting the mainstream narrative, looking behind the scenes at the current globalist agenda and searching for realistic solutions and trying to strive for health, freedom and liberty. The Freemanity Radio Show, broadcast on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, is a completely listener funded station. The station's been on the air for 10 years now. Was set up originally by Mike Ringley, aka Nighthawk. They can only survive, or the station only survives, by listener donations, which keeps all the bills paid, keeps the servers running, keeps all the electricity bills paid. None of the presenters on the station get paid a penny. If anything, most of them will be contributing not only their time, but many of them will be paying a little bit towards keeping the station on the air, all by choice, that is. I myself donate a small amount monthly. I join the Patreon page, which is a simple and easy way to do it, ensuring that Revolution Radio can provide a freedom of speech and continue to get the message out there, waking up one person at a time. In a world where freedom and speaking freedom, one second please, mute. Yes, in a world where speaking the truth, and you've probably heard this before, becomes a revolutionary act. This station and all the presenters on it do exactly what they say and what it says on the packet, Revolution Radio, and it's a major part in the evolution of the mind as billions and millions wake from their coma and start to understand more now than ever what's happening and who's behind the scenes. So help us keep us on the air by donating maybe $5, $10, $20, whatever you can afford. If you just want to give us a one-off payment, that will be fantastic. And here's how to do it. We use Patreon. It's established on Patreon. It's also you can go to the station's donation page, which is https Revolution Radio /donations HTML. The link to the Patreon page is www.patreon.com Revolution Radio, one word. You can send a check-in or some cash wrapped up carefully, of course, to Terry Ackerman, or the address is also on the donations page from Revolution Radio. I'll read it out in here. 1793 North Eden Road, Allen, Michigan 49227. There's also access to a cryptocurrency page, and all of these links are on the donations page, as I mentioned above. You can also go and buy some of our wonderful Rev Radio trinkets and mugs and beer holders and tea stands and all sorts of stuff on Zazzle.com, ZAZZLE.com. Keep us on the air. Get involved, guys. I'd like to say A big hello to everybody in the chat. Let's go and see who's there today. You've got Trucker Gerald. Love your work, Trucker. You've got Boy Solomon, Cat Dog Girl, Just Me, Or Green, SJ, Summer Wine, Batsman, Mace 139, a regular on the show. Harry the Bus, OK Then, LP, Zillihan, Valerie, Gino 2017, Wall E, Comet, Zip Diddy 5, Mr. Rowe, Jer Bear, hello Jer, love your work also mate, great show the other day, when was it? I think it was Saturday night, really enjoyed that, and Wild Bear. So that's the pleasantries out of the way. I'll start the show just by saying this little quote. History is a bunch of lies that are agreed upon and used by the winners of wars. And this was supposedly said by none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. But I was not present at the time he said this, so I cannot confirm it really happened. Today's show is taking a turn back in time. In fact, we go back in time quite a lot, but I think you have to. And we're going to look at our constantly changing and emerging past, and to try and discover potential possibilities and search for possibilities as to why we're where we are now, how we got here, and what's likely coming towards us. I think everybody can feel, or everybody who's slightly conscious can feel, that there's a juggernaut heading towards us fast. And what we do on this show and on this station is try and present opportunities, options and facts to enable the listeners to make informed decisions as to ways to avoid that juggernaut. We currently live in the age of information, we are told, where practically everything we could ever possibly need an answer to is literally at the tip of our fingers, majority of the time. The internet is a gift in many ways, but it's also been used as a powerful weapon against our consciousness and to keep us in the dark, and worst of all, to divide us and turn us against each other. So one needs to be conscious, one needs to be present to look at this information, to decipher our way through it, to not just react to it, to choose our response to what we read and what we see on YouTube and what we see on all these other video channels popping up. Because we live in an age where anything could be put onto video. Anything at all can be, what's the word? Adam, if you're listening, I think I can still hear you, brother. If you could just check and mute the mic, please. It may not be you, it may be just a hiss on the line, but it sounds like there's traffic. Gone are the days, for example, where a new discovery, for instance, an archaeological find, or go back in time, imagine when they discovered the pyramids. Gone are the days when this could be kept from the public until the old money institutions could ensure it was safe and doctored enough to share with the masses. A good example of this is the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I read about. When they were discovered, they were, of course, way before, as far as I remember, I have to check the date, but they were way before the internet, and they were hidden from public view by the Vatican. They were locked away until they were ready. They, saying meaning the Vatican, the Jesuit priests, were ready to share the parts that they decided were palatable and suitable enough and not history changing enough to let the public see. These days, if something is discovered, it can be filmed, photographed and recorded almost instantly and put out for public view literally in seconds. So that the safety net no longer protects the mainstream. So that safety net no longer protects the mainstream history narrative. So it's a good thing, I guess. Just wondered in the chat if anyone could just give us a sound check. Let us know we're coming out loud and clear. Is there any interference or is it all in my headphones? That would be wonderful. Yes. Stardust Man. Trucker Gerald. Hello, everyone. Yes. So today's show, as I say, we're going to be discussing hidden history. Now, I was initially going to have another guest on the show called Max Egan. I'm sure you've heard of him from the Crow House. Max is a bit of an old hand and really seems to have a good grasp on all the latest stuff to do with the Tartarian discovery, the Tartarian Empire, and the mud floods. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, but he's going to come on in maybe a week or so's time. And alongside him, I was going to have another guest who is actually coming on the show in a little while with me. His name is Adam Lewington, and he's actually Australian, but he's living currently in a place called Lithuania in Eastern Europe. So we'll be talking to him in a little while. Adam is, I would say, extremely well versed on all things alternative history. I've discovered him on social media. I won't say any more than that. I've discovered him on social media, writing some amazingly informative posts on various subjects. A lot of them are to do with certain religious doctrines, but in general, they joined a hell of a lot of dots for me, and they made so much sense in the way he delivered the information. So we'll go back to talk to him in a little while. I'm just going to carry on reading my notes, which I carefully typed out specifically for you all. So with regards to the fact that we're in this age of information currently, there's so much information. There is so much access to truth and knowledge being put out there. The powers that be are doing everything they possibly can to either completely delete informative websites off YouTube, for example, shut down people discussing or talking truth on the other big social media platforms, and in general on the internet in general, websites just disappear or get completely overwhelmed with disinformation. So far they can't even get up the rankings to be searched for, but they're losing the battle, and in the panic because they are actually losing the battle, more and more information is becoming apparent. On a current point, there is so much information available from medical professionals, from real people in the medical world, from nurses, natural practitioners, doctors, people risking their professional livelihoods to get information out, that I feel the fact there is so much information, not to mention all of the people who are putting their own specific truths out from experiences they're going through with this injection that we're all where they're attempting to trick us all into taking. So I would say that the amount and the mammoth amounts of information available, there is simply no excuse for those who have walked blindly in and fallen for this trap that's been sprung with this pandemic. All of those that have rolled up their sleeves and taken the mark simply because they have decided to trust the system, well, unfortunately, I feel suffer for their laziness. For them, there will be no recourse, nor will they be able to receive any insurance payouts if or when they become sick, simply because they were too lazy or too trusting in the medical establishment to bother questioning the narrative, and many, in fact, turning on people daring to speak out against the machine. This officially recognised medical experiment is well underway, and in America alone, I hear there are just over a third of people who have already been vaccinated at least once. But just like the cracks appear at the top of the piste on the snowy sides of mountains, the avalanche is primed and ready. And I unfortunately feel, from the evidence that I've gathered and the trusted sources that I look at, there are going to be many, many, many people who are going to regret taking the vaccine. But back to today's subject of alternative history. Maybe it's the history we've been told is a lie. Were some ancient buildings built by a different race and their true history was covered up? Did ancient peoples have advanced forms of technology that have now been forgotten? Was the massive kingdom of Tartaria visible on ancient maps still today, much more advanced than we know or realise or have been allowed to understand? Is there a huge cover-up emerging that shows most of our school book history is one great big lie? or at the very least missing massive parts of the truth. It certainly seems that way to me and many others as we look back in time at the thousands of digitised online photographs alone that are showing questionable proof that the dates and stories that we have been told simply cannot add up. You may have heard of the subject of Tartaria and these mud floods, which is a narrative that is being researched by many on the internet today. It's a fascinating subject, and one I feel that really deserves to be looked into in detail and discussed thoroughly. It opens the doors and connects many other mysteries of the historical world for me personally. Things that simply did not ever make sense to me as a child are slowly beginning to make more sense now as I join the dots and see the missing parts to the story. The word reset is being bandied about by the 0.001% on purpose. There's no accident, and we find there is still much we do not know about our real genuine past, and that past has had many other potential resets. You have in the Bible Noah's floods, biblical stories of allegorical representations of things that probably really happened. There was the Tower of Babel story of Babylon. There, look at the pyramids of Giza, which were apparently, again, this is all second-hand information because none of us were there, but apparently, according to lots of research, were once lush jungle, and the actual River Nile was much closer to the Giza plateau. Something happened around the 1840s or the 1800s. There are many photos of huge, beautifully built, intricate cities from all over the world, and many of these photos are dated, but they have very little or no people in the photos. In what should have been bustling, suburbia, huge palaces, huge buildings, but no one in the pictures, no people. But going back to the reset situation, well, no, in fact, it also seems possible that almost 1,000 years have been added to our timeline, meaning that we're actually nowhere close to the 21st century, and the so-called Middle Ages maybe didn't even exist. And this means our history is even more fabricated than we could ever think. And that reminds me of a little side note that just comes to mind. When I lived in London, a good friend of mine was talking to some Freemasons that he knows. His stepfather was a Freemason. They're not all bad. And they were discussing the fact that at the headquarters of the Grand Lodge in London in Covent Garden, somebody who had been in there said that they work within the organisation on a completely different timeline. All of their literature, all of their diaries and their paperwork is all dated very differently to the dates that we are using with the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar is a purely Catholic creation named after Pope Gregory, who once apparently decided to set in stone a new timeline, and we're all still following it today. A question I pondered many times is which entity is really pulling the majority of the strings. We talk about the Catholics, and we talk about the Jesuits, and we talk about the Zionists. These are some of the questions that I'd like to ask Adam. And I guess let's get him on the show. Adam, are you there, mate? You may be on mute, my friend. Unmute your Skype. Adam, are you there? He's obviously... Hello? Testing, 1, 2. Okay, Adam doesn't seem to be there just at the moment. Just going to send him a quick message. Calling you in now, mate. Turn on your mic. I remember a couple of times I've done half a show with the mic off. Well, not half a show, maybe 10 minutes. So there are many anomalies in our history. I mentioned a few just now. There are maybe I'll have to bring Adam in. Let's have a quick look. He should be in on the call. How do I do this? Let's add someone to the call. Yes, it's only me. Okay, so let's add Adam to the call and see if I can get him on board. Add. Let's see if we can get you in on the call, Adam. While I'm waiting for that to go through,
Greetings.
Adam, you're there.
I'm here.
Fantastic. Yeah, we had a little bit of a connection problem there. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you very much, brother. Blessings to you and blessed to be here.
Yeah.
And hello to all of your audience. Thanks for tuning in.
Wonderful. So, as I say, Adam, I gave you a little bit of an intro earlier. I first came across your knowledge on a certain platform we won't mention. We don't want to promote it, but with some wonderfully written, really beautifully written information, joining so many dots for me on various subjects. So one of your favourite subjects is the Catholic Church, but I also wanted to discuss with you what your thoughts are on the current emerging information on Tartaria and the mud floods and its connection in general with everything that we seem to see coming to the surface at this time of in this age of information we're in.
Yep. So a lot of what we see on the interweb, it is absolutely, without question, put there for us to see. And we need to understand and understand the amount of control on the outer net, because it's not our inner net. It's not our internal network that we can guide ourselves off intuitively. It's just all this information that's dumped out there. And there is a group of people that sit back and they watch people as they absorb the information, and they know what directive to take politically, religiously, economically, based on the reaction of the public that absorbs this information. So with the amount of information that's going around the outer net, let's call it the outer net, because it's not the internet, it's not our internal network that we come with as humans. It was created for us to go outside of ourselves intuitively. And we need to ask the question, where did this network come from? Because DARPANET, which was the original name for the internet, was a military communication network where they could send signal and communicate on this network that couldn't be taken down. They had all control and access to who could receive the information. They could lock people out. They could keep people locked in. It was a secure network, basically. And then slowly they provided it into the house. So a lot of people say, a lot of people ask me, they request information and sources on the internet to prove what I'm trying to say. And what they're basically saying is, and it's the truth, what they're basically saying is where's your non-intuitive proof? And a lot of these people are navigating the typical realm of day and night without intuition. And we need to tap back into that source, because that's where they don't want us. When they had the mental asylums in the 18th century, which were very, very profound in many families' lives, because you would just give your family member away if they were questioning the system. If you questioned the system 100 and 200 years ago, your family would just be trained to discommunicate you from the family, and you would be locked away in a cell. So today things are different. And basically, this program was put into society to tell us not to listen to the voices in our head. How many times have we all heard this? We've all heard the saying not to listen to the voices in your head. What is the voice? What is the communication? Where's it coming from? And what is God? Because we have what was originally called the Inquisition. There's a building in Rome, and above the temple, it was embellished, the Inquisition. That's what the building was called, and that's where the Inquisitions were directed and conveyed from. But they changed that name of the building. They removed the plaque with the writing, the Inquisition, and they changed the name in 1965 to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faiths. Now, what does that mean? Because when you congregate all of the doctrines, all of the literatures of every religious doctrine on the planet, what do you have? You have world domination of every person, because we came here to be spiritual people. So what does it mean to control the element of the spirituality? So you can be of the Islamic tradition. You can be of the original tribes of any country, which are all now reformed to Catholicism. That's what they came and fought for through the Crusades.
Yeah.
The Tartarian takeover, as some would rather call it. And so a lot of people, they say, oh, yeah, the Vatican archives and the Alexandrian library, they have all the information they stole from us and they've kept them locked in a vault. What is in those libraries, and why is the main controller of those informations Rome? When Rome fell, how Rome fell. Whenever you turn on History Channel or the Discovery Channel, they just drum you with how Rome fell. And who owns the History Channel? It's a Knight of Malta, which is Vatican militia. Same as the Discovery Channel. So every time you turn on Discovery Channel or the History Channel, the reason why the History Channel's logo is the Roman pillars with the temple of Rome, they're telling you, but not the normal observer can see this basic symbolism. Symbolism is the language.
Yeah.
And the word language.
Let me ask you something, Adam, just very quickly. What's your understanding of when the Roman Empire, if it existed in the way that we're taught in films like Gladiator, etc., because I know there's a lot of questionable there. When did it transmute into what we know known as the Roman Catholic Church, and what's your understanding of why it happened? Like, was it as we're taught when they could no longer defend the empire because they were too spread out, they came back and kind of shut down the army and turned into a religion? Is that something similar?
Well, it was around the 16th century, mid-16th century, continued into the 17th century. It was a pretty long-scale war. We're still in that war.
Yeah.
And it is a war because it's governed by a militia, the military of the Vatican, which are called the Jesuits.
Yeah.
Originally, they were called Alessombrados, which in Spanish means the illuminated ones, which is where the Illuminati comes from, where you hear people say the Illuminati. But the word Illuminati means not illuminated. The Illuminati are not the luminaries. They're not the illuminated. That's why "il" as a prefix means not. So if you put "il" before any word, it means not. So what we need to understand is what the Vatican's aims have been for the last 500 years, and what this new agenda is bringing out. Because if you get the book that every good Catholic had, the Catechism, and it was the book of how to behave with the Roman Catholic faiths traditionally. So it was one of the guidelines in the Catechism is when you're walking down the street with more than two people, make sure not to make any noise so that nobody can hear you. So some countries have started rolling out this terrorism against the people, which is like when you get on a train, no talking at all. This is slowly starting to implement itself in Australia. So we know about it in China. We know about it in Japan.
Wow.
But in Brisbane, for example, in Brisbane of Australia, Queensland, the capital city, in Queensland, they have 3 carriage trains or they have 6 carriage trains. They always have their 3s and 6s. They love it. And so 1 carriage out of every 3 carriages is the quiet carriage, and you don't talk in the quiet carriage. 2 carriages out of every 6 carriage trains are the quiet carriage. But this is slowly implementing the guidelines for the New World Order, what some would like to call it, or the rollout of the new system, which they put it on the Time magazine. Every major newspaper on the planet in the last 15 months has used on their front page the New World Order as a headline. So no longer is it something to talk about. It's the people that we've been. It's happening, and now what they're doing is they want people to open their eyes. That's what revelation is. Revelations is about the revealing of truth, and it's part of the ritual. If they don't have people aware of what's coming before it's coming, they fail the curse of black magic. So that's why Barack Hussein Obama, the etymology of those three words put together means blessed, handsome, deceit. And Barack in the Islamic faith Bible was one of the judges of hell. And there's no questions there. Like, you know, I don't have any sort of like things to take off with different topics with that. It is as blatant as it's stated. And
okay, that's fantastic. Let me just interject there. So I'd like to hear your explanation of something I think is so obvious. The Bible has been edited and rewritten about 26,000 times, I think, or maybe 260,000 times, I think. And we hear, again, new information coming out. I've been reading reading a story about how the Catholic Church, or maybe the Jesuits, actually paid and created, and this may be a bit controversial for some, the Islamic religion by funding Muhammad, who was actually obviously a real person, a prophet, into the position of being a prophet, gave him funds to start an army, and this got out of hand. So you're here. What I'm basically saying is that correct in your understanding?
It's irrefutable. So, Firstly, before looking at who Mark Zuckerberg is, we must look at who his father was. Who was Muhammad's family? Muhammad's family were all Roman Catholic. So hang on a second. What is a full Roman Catholic devout family doing, coming and creating the biggest religion of the Eastern tradition? And why is 50% roughly of Christian churches with only Islamic symbols, and vice versa? Only around 50% of the Islamic churches Christian symbols, around 50% of the Christian temples have Islamic symbols, because they were all the same Tartarian spirituality, and they were all divining buildings, and all of those symbols are astrological. And talk about Julius Caesar and Pope Gregory changing the calendars. JC was Julius Caesar. That's the timeline we were living on, and they threw this Jesus Christ character into the picture, and then everyone started worshipping Jesus Christ. But it was Julius Caesar. But when the date was written, up until about 200 years ago, the letter J was the first letter before the number of the year we were in on the calendar was written. But what they did was, about 250, 240 years ago, they scrubbed out the J's and added a 1. So that's where your extra 1,000 years comes from.
Okay. So you think that's potentially correct? They've added 1,000 years?
100%. And not only have they done that, they've changed the zodiac. So when you look up like the astrology charts, you're looking at a tropical astrology chart. Like any astrology chart will tell you like where the stars are and what house they're in and what constellation they're traveling through. But if you look up at the sky, that doesn't match. So if you look back to the original astrology that we had, we can see, like, if Mars is in Aries on sidereal astrology, which was the original astrology, which is what the Freemasons use, you know that picture of the sun and moon.
Astrology, you mean?
Yes, that's right. So you know the picture, you know the Masonic picture on the Masonic floor with the ladder going up towards the eye, and then the sun and moon either side.
Yeah.
So that ladder is Jacob's ladder of Freemasonry, and at the top of that ladder is Saturn, which is Elohim. And that is because sidereal astrology puts Saturn as the center, and then the sun and moon are either side because they're the twin pillars. And they've made they have created a whole system of people worldwide that either choose the lunar-based astrology or the solar-based astrology. But being central, the central pillar walker, you would have to have Saturn as the center, which is Elohim, which goes back to the Kabbalah, back to Babylon, even before that. We as the tribes all had this information. It wasn't even written. We just knew. Because you could look at the sky and observe.
I've heard Santos Bonacci talking about this. I think. And also Michael Tessiron on this very subject. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Oh, so basically the purpose of the Vatican is to take everybody out of the jungle, which they've done. That's the first part. That's the most important part. So everybody has been removed from their homes, but they were actually moved to different locations. So, for example, just looking at one country, it wasn't just about where I live in Lithuania. It wasn't about the Lithuanians going to Siberia during the Polish, Russian, and the German invasions, which were all run by the Vatican. It was about, in Australia, for example, where I come from, all of the tribes of the original land, they were all taken from their location and moved to a different location. But what the Vatican didn't realize was that they all shared the same story. So no matter where they were put, they all had the knowledge still. So I've spent time on country with elders that tell me things I've never heard in the history book. Some of the most amazing information that will never be written because it comes from the people of knowing, the originals.
Verbally taught.
Like, no one knows that Australia was where all the gold from the Egyptian pyramids came from. But the council even puts that in the logo of where the gold comes from. So in Ararat, in Australia, the council logo is the 3 pyramids of Cairo with spirals coming out of the land into the pyramid, showing that the land of Ararat is where the gold from the pyramids came from. And I didn't learn this through symbolism. I had an elder tell me this. So I hold this as great knowledge because at the end of the day, you do not get the choice to choose a little bit of government knowledge and a little bit of original knowledge. It's either the truth or not. You are not... Yeah. There's no pick and choosing. I know people who are a little bit of Catholic, a little bit of Islam, a little bit of this and that, but it's all governed by the Vatican. As Revelation states in their book, the mother of and harlot of all faiths is the Vatican. The Bible actually says that in Revelation.
Let me ask you this, Adam. Sorry again, because you're giving me so many points I wanted to discuss. So with regards to, for example, we were talking about who wrote the Bible. We're going through Revelations now, in some people are saying we're actually, it's almost like we're the Christians of the world are following that like a script. It says it in the Bible. To me it's so obvious. I was brought up Church of England, Christian confirmed, the whole lot, sent to Sunday school every week by my mum to get us out, mum and dad to get me out of the house. Nothing stuck. I knew it just didn't connect with me in the slightest. I was a choir boy and everything. So what I'm trying to say is the Christians that are completely dogmatic and are reading this Bible, they're reading a script to bring them into a certain place in their minds. That makes sense? Yeah. Yep. And another issue another point I'd like to bring up with you is, and I just want to remind you because I may forget, I've got so many bits of paper here. You were talking about, I've got so many bits of paper. You were talking about the elder that taught you this and how they moved the people around and eventually got the stolen generation and everything. They had to break these people because they were connected to the earth, and they've done it all around the world. And it's the same minds behind every army that was sent out, behind the missionaries first. I totally understand that. But with regards to this country that I'm lucky enough to live in at the moment, is a question I have to ask you, and we can go back to it because I don't want you to lose your train of thought if you haven't already.
I've gone.
Basically, there's impossible architecture in this country. I've been looking at one of my favourite YouTube channels is John Levi. I don't know if you know of him.
I know John Levi.
Yeah.
If I could just say one thing here, one of my good friends, Marcia Romulo, Marcia Rahmalo, she actually wrote most of the work that John Levi has copied without consent, and she's pretty upset about that. But he's got a lot of great information. But you need to go to the Blue. Type in the Blue on YouTube, and you'll find the originator of that knowledge. She's a great researcher. I highly recommend her to everybody, and there's not one thing I've been able to pin that she's been inaccurate on her work.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, you may have some insight then, because I'd like to talk about the impossible architecture that seems to be Tartarian in design, that was on this continent. There's some in Perth, there's some in Melbourne. There's one building in Melbourne that, if we were looking at the population at that time of supposed convicts that were shipped across from England, where did the builders of these buildings come from? And
they're still there.
They're still there. And there's one place, I've got it written down here. Let me just quickly find it. The Garden Palace in Sydney, in Australia. That's right. There's a Footscray one, but there's Garden Palace in Sydney that was actually built in 1879 and then burnt to the ground conveniently after 3 years after it was built. Now, these buildings had stone in them. Where did the stonemasons come from? Where are the quarries they got the stone from to build it? How did they move it when they were still driving horse and cart in those days? And how did they get the buildings? How did they build these buildings? So I'm asking you this because surely if there's any fact in these buildings being there, then obviously that changes history here. And were they living in harmony with the indigenous people here, if they were people here? Do you have any information on that? Do you want to talk about it now, or should we go back to what you were talking about?
No, we'll talk about that. So what is down talked is the knowledge and professions of the original tribes. So as a perfect example, when the original people of Australia were put into camps, those camps were called missions. And they were directed by the missionaries. So if you look up even the basic meaning of a missionary, it was someone who the Pope sent out to perform the work that he told them that must be performed and conducted. So basically, all of the mission sites are Vatican operation camps. And one thing that's not acknowledged on the original maps is the size of the Murray-Darling, the Murray River and the Darling River and where they meet. So an elder told me, and this isn't in the books, but an elder told me that the Murray-Darling was so big, it was an ocean inlet, and every time someone came down, one of the invaders, like Matthew Flinders, which is what Flinders Street's named after, with all of the Tartarian temples on that street, James Cook, there's a few other guys, for 500 years, the Vatican kept trying to send naval ships down the Murray-Darling, and they couldn't get halfway down because the artillery of the original tribes of Australia was so profound that all of the boats sunk. So now when we look at the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is owned by the Jesuits, and when we look at how it was depicted, the knowledge of the original people, we just think of these people in spears with the bay leaf over their genitals, and we think of them hunting and talking ooga booga. Like we think of these troglodyte cavemen that have no skills at all. That was the lie. That was the lie that the Vatican has hidden behind.
Of course.
So these people had all skills that we can imagine. They had mineral mines. They knew
farming, land management, at the very least. They were a very organised civilization, but they lived with the land, not from the land.
And in terms of farming, if you look at all of the Golden Belt, the fruit belts, all of these different belts that are in Australia that are being operated by the government, owned by the government, they were set up by the original people. They were all set up by the original people. So they were the belts that were being farmed by the original people. And when we go to places like Melbourne in Victoria, that city was a yam farm. That was the original people's yam farm. And that was where they got their potatoes. So every time, I get into these topics with people who live in Melbourne, I say, you're living on a potato farm, right? And they ask a few questions, but it's really interesting. That was the location of where they're, like these people were migratory people. They migrated, they kept working the land, and that's why it is the most beautiful growing land in the world. Just like the Amazon was man-made. It was man-made by the original people, and they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. They knew the land. They knew all of the minerals, all of the plants, all of the cosmic domains, and they knew the spirit running through all of them, which was their religion. So when you walk into their temples today and you say, like, what is it? Like, what am I looking for? Like, I just want to be a better person. And these people take you away from yourself and say, if you don't come to church on Sunday, you can't reach eternal salvation. And those 87 parts that were removed from the Testament, all of those 87 passages that have been removed since the King James Bible in 1611, or I should say 611, all of those passages that have been removed, all have the same subject, and that is eternal salvation. So it's like, if it was possible that book was a fairy tale, why wouldn't they just delete the whole book? Why did they have to remove all of the parts on how to reach eternal salvation, which is, Like the most important thing, if you're a caterpillar and you've had the knowledge stolen from you on how to become a butterfly, this is terrorism. This is spiritual warfare.
Analogy. Yeah, a great analogy. I like that.
So a lot of people are the caterpillars, and they're all saying like, I don't believe in butterflies. That's how crazy this is, because every single thing has transition in the world. Every animal. There's no animal that's born as something and dies as the same juvenile. Like it's, it's very, very, very beautiful existence that we've been born into, that the Vatican has put a smokescreen over and said, don't worry, go to work. AI is coming and you'll be happy. You'll own nothing. And
be happy. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So look, I will say one thing to answer your question in short. Where did the buildings come from? Where did the minerals come from? We need to go back with the original mindset, and we have that answer. So in the Western paradigm, if we say like, how did you build that? How did you put that nail in the wall with a hammer and a nail? I've never done it before. When you do it, then you'll understand. So basically, to shorten that all these buildings are technology. They're not places to enter and just sit down and say, wow, look what man has done. This place is a glorious place. All the buildings are technological devices. If you look at the Chartres Cathedral, and then you type in Schumann resonator, which is the computer chip that's just been released 2-3 years ago, they're the exact same shape of technology device. And that's how we can know that the cathedral floors are the Schumann resonating devices. And
I've seen many photographs of certain buildings, certain structures that are exactly laid out as specific supercomputer circuit boards. You've got your the same. I can't think of anything, but you've got the same names. Each building has if you look at the building, the computer companies that are building these buildings as well. So totally get you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's why you've got Battery Park in New York, Manhattan, and if you look at the actual layout of architecture and go to even Google Satellite, not to trust NASA as the be all and end all for information, but you can see basic imagery overlaid through CGIs. If you do a topographical satellite view of those areas, you can actually see how it is a satellite. How it is a battery system, and all the people that they get moving through New York City are being usurped of their souls. So, for example, Flinders Street in Melbourne?
Yeah.
That's the largest place in Australia of foot traffic, potentially in the Southern Hemisphere. So what that means is more foot traffic moves through that building every day than anywhere else in Australia. So why? As soon as you look at the building on the face of the front of the wall, there's 8 different clocks of the different time zones around the world. But what we've had diminished from our minds is what a time portal is. So we're meant to just look at a place like Flinders Street with the basic mind dumbed down, and we're meant to say, that's not a time machine. This guy's crazy. What are you talking about? But they put all the clocks there and they laugh at us. And they're all built on the ley lines. Flinders Street is on one of the crossovers of the ley lines. And we'll call it a NASCAR line, call it a song line, call it a dream line, whatever you will. They're all ceremonial lines that send signal. Yep, they all send Wi-Fi, and we're all told you need to get the Wi-Fi router, man, because then you'll have Wi-Fi. But where did this technology come from? Everything in the physical realm is a blueprint from nature. Our phones, our computers, the RAM is the Aries pineal gland, which is what is our receiver. The pineal glands that we all know about now, we've all been talking about it for 20, 30 years. All of the older traditions, for example, India, Tartaria, right on the border of China and Russia. Everyone talks about the Kundalini, but no one's really talking about the rainbow serpent unless they go to Australia, because that's their name for it. Okay. And so in 1930, or we could call it 930. In 1930, there was a new branch of studies that was called the field of endocrinology. Now, we know the word endocrinology. It's the endocrine glands and it's the functions of the organs of the body. The word endocrinology is another word for chakra. We don't have to get too deep on that. However, we need to ask questions why the chemicals were renamed from telecamine, telekinesis, to harmaline, why they called it what it was in the original science. they've changed the name of something that was originally called a fluid of the pineal gland. It was called telekinesis, and they changed it to harmaline, because they want those negative connotations.
In which original
They want
language
us-
was it originally called?
English.
Right.
English. So
Okay.
the basic name for it, if you study like the vitalogy, like in the 1930s, even the doctors had the handbook of plant medicine. That's not that long ago. Every doctor had a book on plant medicine. Now they've got all these pharmaceutical references. So I highly recommend everybody to download. You can't download it, but it's the book. It's up to like the 12th edition now, but they've stopped it. They took it off every doctor. It's called The Vitalogy. You can still buy it on eBay for like $200, sometimes $300. They're expensive, but they are the original book that all the doctors had before they stopped plant medicine being the main medicine, and they call that now alternative medicine. But the word alternative means alter, native. Change the natural state. So
that's
what's
very close to my heart. I'm an Ayurveda practitioner, so yeah, I totally get that.
And what's even interesting, like when you look at Indian medicine, Chinese medicine, African medicine, they're all the same, because we're all on the same place here. We're all on the same plane of existence. You come to my country where I live now, I'll show you arugula, whatever you want to call rocket. I'm looking at it growing out of the back fields. Like I can show you different plants. We have different names, but plant medicine, Pythagoras wrote the book on, he called it the correspondence of signatures. I've talked about this in a lot of my videos. So the correspondence of signatures is how you can identify a plant and know what it's used for without referencing a book. And there's a guy named Elliot Cohen. He goes to all the different shamans of the world, and he has a dialogue of questions which he asks them. And he says to one of them, the peyote shaman of America, he says, if you've never studied at university for one day even, if you've never looked at a video online and you've never read a book in your life, how do you know everything you know about pharmacology? And his reply was, my friend, everything I know about pharmacology, I learned through my friend peyote. So peyote is a healing medicine, but she also shows you many things. That's the nature of the call we're put in. That's what God has given us.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone who runs from natural medicine and calls it alternative medicine, what's altered native is Western medicine, because they've altered the native state through synthesis. They've synthesized it and changed it. So that's alternative medicine, because it's the native state being altered. So that was the Vatican. And I supply to the world the most inquisitive medicine on the planet, and it's the most feared medicine on the planet, and does more wonders for anyone. And we know that little red mushroom. We know those little white spots on it. And Pythagoras even said, one of the first important things upon identifying a plant is how you feel when you look at it. So when we see that red mushroom, we think, wow, that's beautiful. I'm going to take a photo. Then we take that photo home, but we still hold the fear inside us, because that's how we were programmed to feel about one of the strongest medicines on the planet.
That's interesting. And I also know that the church themselves have a lot of connection with that particular mushroom, and a lot of their robes and their costumes have a lot of significance to do with that, for very good reason.
Absolutely.
But they obviously keep that from the masses.
That's right, but it's right on the cathedral walls. It's in the window panes, because those windows tell you the pain and stories of history. But if we look at Islam, for example, which is a creation of the Vatican, cough, cough. If we look at who Muhammad, the prophet, received his messages from, it was the red mushroom with the white spots. It was the Amanita muscaria. So if you look up, just do a bit of research. Where did Muhammad receive the prophet information from? And he was ridden on a horse, which is the colors of the Amanita. And then he went and met God, and God gave him the instructions. But then you look at the Church of Jesus Christ. I could show you about 700 images from different cathedrals around the world of Christ coming out of the mushroom, which is where Santa comes from. The red and white Santa Claus comes from Siberia, which was the day of the solstice and the 21st of December. And that day was when the Siberian shamans would climb through their chimneys because the doors were snow packed in. They get about 6, 7, 8 foot of snow. So they can't use their front doors. You wouldn't bother trying to scoop your way out. And so they would go through the chimney and they would get the stockings of Christmas. And that's where they dried their Amanita muscaria mushrooms, in the stockings. So, there's a lot of symbolism. But that's on the day of Jesus Christ, Christmas. Yeah. Santa, Christ, and the mushroom are the same.
Adam, let me just hold you there, my friend. We're just going into the hour break. We're going to come back on the other side with Adam Lewington talking all things truth and alternative information. So many subjects here. Speak to you on the other side, mate.
Great.
Put you on mute.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
Broadcasting live from the peak of Mount Warning, the most easterly point of Australia. Tune in to the Free Manatee Radio Show with your host, Spread Love, every Monday, 6 a.m. EST. On the show each week, we discuss realistic solutions to help you observe rather than take part in the globalist agenda. We will dig into the past to find solutions for the future. We will discuss the wisdom of Ayurveda, the science of life, for techniques for understanding and achieving personal health and longevity. Please join us every Monday on Studio A, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Free Manatee Radio broadcast with your host, Spread Love, on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Management would like to take a moment to thank the listeners and hosts for all their support that has made Revolution Radio one of the biggest platforms for free speech in an ever-growing dark world of censorship. Unfortunately, this platform for free speech has never been free. We need the support of the people. It is the people like you, yes, you, that keeps the station in the front lines of the battle against tyranny and oppression. Please help support Revolution Radio so free speech will not be silenced in a world that seems to be going deaf to the real truth. With your support, we will be able to become an even bigger pillar of light in a dark world.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Revolution Radio. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back to the second hour. Spread love in the house. Talking to our good friend Adam Lewington from who's actually over there in Lithuania. Just before the break, we were chatting about the Amascaria mushroom and its relationship to many aspects of the Catholic Church. But I'd like to just get back on track a little bit because we can talk about that. This is going to come up in the subject again. And Adam's going to give you his website at the end of the second hour. Let's get back to Tartaria and Tartary and its relationship to a lot of the information that's been uncovered today. Now, Tartary, if you didn't know, a little description, is a vast country in the northern parts of Asia, surrounded by Siberia in the north and west. It was called Great Tartary. The Tartars who lie south of Muscovy, which is obviously Moscow and Siberia, are those of Astrakhan, Caucasia and Dagestan, and situated northwest of the Caspian Sea, the Kalmuk Tatars who lie between Siberia and the Caspian Sea, the Uzbek Tatars and Moguls who lie north of Persia and India, and lastly, those of Tibet who lie northwest of China. That's from the Encyclopedia Britannica from 1771. It's a huge landmass. If you can picture from the northern Ural Mountains, close to what we're told is the North Pole, right the way down to India and the borders of China. And some say that the Great Wall of China was actually built to keep the Tartarians out of China. Now, to compare the description given by Wikipedia, Tartaria was a Latin name used from the Middle Ages until the 20th century to describe and designate the great tract of northern and central Asia, stretching from the Caspian Sea and the Ural Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. Settled mostly by Turco-Mongol peoples after the Mongol invasion and subsequent Turkic migrations. Now, obviously, as usual, they twist it and turn it into something insignificant. It's a huge, it's probably the biggest. Russia is obviously the biggest country size-wise, and it was even bigger once when it was the USSR. So this country, or this landmass, had many different kinds of people and civilizations in it. I would also say religions, but somehow they seem to get along. There's a huge swathe of history missing. And the first I heard of this was when I heard that apparently Napoleon Bonaparte wasn't actually doing what's written in the history books. He was actually fighting and trying to remove the last of the Tartarian Empire. Then we go into the future, go to a much later time. There was a famous CIA document which was declassified in 1998. It was created in 1957. And this caused a big stir, and it's one of the main points that kind of got everyone looking into the Tartarian story. It says, I quote, "Or let us take the matter of history, which along with religion, language and literature, constitute the core of a people's cultural heritage. Here again, the communists have interfered with in a shameless manner. For example, on 9th of August 1944, the Central Committee of the Communist Party, sitting in Moscow, issued a directive ordering the party's Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a specific revision of the history of Tartaria, to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of the nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten. Let us be frank, was to be falsified in order to eliminate references to the Great Russian aggression and hide the facts of the real course of the Tartar-Russian relations. And this was no isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, historians on orders of the Communist Party have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians appear always in a good light." Sounds familiar. Needless to say, histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed. so that the present and future generations of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the true facts of their nation's past. Well, I think we know that their nation's past isn't what they believe. I think the evidence is again becoming clearer. And also, of course, this misses out. It's the CIA document, but this misses out an important part, that who was behind the communist agenda in Russia? Who sent Karl Marx and who wrote the Communist Manifesto? Who sent Lenin and Trotsky in on a sealed train through countries? They didn't want to let them off. It was almost like it was a virus into Russia with money and arms and all of the needed to start the communist revolution. It came from the West. It's the same people behind everything, and I think the Catholic Church is a big part of that. Back to you, Adam. What are your thoughts on what I just read? I think you may be muted, mate. Oh, there you go. No, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So without a doubt, I will say that the Vatican is behind every cataclysm, Catholic cataclysm. They are behind every major cataclysm that's happened in the last 300 years, thereabouts. So if I read you, this is a CIA document. So this is declassified. We know after 33 years, they have to declassify information. That's just in their, what they do. Like, they always declassify everything because, like, the word secret comes from the word secrete, because all secrets secrete. All secrets eventually come to surface. That's where the saying comes from. So just because something's been declassified, it does not mean that it will be in your letterbox the next day. We need to look and discern truth correctly. Like, there's no looking at the truth and then just saying, I know the truth. You need to be correctly discerning. This is a CIA document. I'll just read it. Or let us take the matter of history, which, along with religion, language, and literature, constitute the core of a people's cultural heritage. Here again, the communists have interfered in a shameless manner. For example, on the 9th of August 1944, the Central Committee of the Communist Party, sitting in Moscow, issued a directive ordering the party's Tatar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria. So
Adam, sorry to interrupt. I that's exactly what I just read. I think we must be looking at the same page.
Okay,
I just read that. Yes, no, totally.
Yeah.
No, I just read that.
So basically, that is a released document from the Central Intelligence Agency, which was this. If we look at the CIA and who created that, it was a Knight of Malta, which are subjective to the Vatican. Now, if we look at Lenin, if we look at Karl Marx, a lot of people are talking about Karl Marx being a 33rd degree Mason, you know? So what the Freemasons say is they're a fraternity of their own organization and they have nothing to do with the Vatican. But we know that the Vatican created Freemasonry as a guild to build the cathedral. So that's why when you have the entered apprentice, you have your apprenticeship when you're building temples or houses or any of what you like to call it. So then you have the tiler, and the tiler is the guy at the door with the sword or the battle axe. They don't use the battle axe or sword anymore. That's what they say. It's more of like a symbol. It's all symbolism. But the tiler was the one that he filmed. He laid a film of the cathedral floor called Tiles. That's why they got the name Tiles. So if we look at all of the degrees of Freemasonry, you've got the treasurer. They're the ones that keep all the finances and accountabilities of what they're doing and what the expenditures are and all these sorts of things.
Treasure they stole.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And even all the treasury buildings of the planet, they were stolen. So the reason of the word Freemason is because they came and took it for free. They took it by force. But the greatest question is, how did they do it without armies? Because we know about scalar wave technology, which can wipe an entire population off their feet through pulse wave radioactive materials, which just drives itself through the ether. Where I live in Lithuania, it's it was originally Tartaria. So you've got all of the European countries, like we're pretty close to the border of Russia here, what's known as Russia. Under the USSR, Lithuania was Russia, but there was a reformation in the 19th century, 1900s, 900s, whatever you want to call it. There was a reformation where all of the people of Lithuania sought independence and they exited the USSR. So that's where a lot of places lost a lot of finance, because when Russia came in, they took everyone's houses away. In Lithuania, people were living in the villages, in the forest, but now everyone's in the cities. So that was one of the big maneuvers of the USSR, was to get all of the people in the village, in the forests, out. Because slow incrementations, even into the now, the agenda is to put everybody into built-up megacities and to control and hold them captive in these areas and to monitor everything they do. So if we look at Europe, we're looking at Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Austria, Hungary, Serbia, you name it. All of those places that are part of the European Union, they were all part of Tartaria. And speaking of Napoleon, who was one of the Pope's servants, he came to Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, and he's recognized in history to have said about Saint Anne's. I've got to stop confusing the word Satan with Saint Anne, but that's what they're getting at when they call the cathedral Saint Anne's. He said when he saw Saint Anne's Cathedral in Vilnius, if I could take any church home or any place home in the palm of my hands, it would be this temple. So that was in Lithuania that he said that. Now, when we look at the narrative of what Nazi Germany was doing during the world wars and what Poland was doing in Lithuania and what Russia was doing in Lithuania, all of the military generals of Poland, Germany, and Russia were all Knights of Malta, meaning they were all in service and subjective to the Pope. So everything they were doing was what the Pope told them to do. That's all about bringing the land back to the Roman Empire. So you call it Roman Catholicism if you want. If we call it accurately and correctly what it is the never fallen Roman Empire. It is Babylon.
Well, you have to just look at the symbolism that the Nazi Party used. It was all Roman. I mean,
that's
all
right.
of the regalia and everything. Obviously, they took the swastika from the Hindu religion and turned it back to front completely. But yeah, I mean, it looked like, you squint a little bit, you could be looking at a load of Roman centurions walking with their red carpets and their red plumes and their feathers and the what do they call the big long sticks with the eagles on top? It's identical.
The fasces.
That's it. The fasces. Yes.
So when we look at what happened with Napoleon, he marched hundreds of thousands of people into the haunts of Siberia and left them there to freeze to death, so they couldn't come back to France. That maneuver was so that the French patriots, those people, would fight for France. That's what they were doing. That's what they were told to be doing. That's what we thought they were doing. But the reason why they were all marched into the Siberian desert to die, that was part of the takeover of France, the Tartarian version of it. So if you go to the maps again and you hover above Germany on the ocean side, you can see that all of the land has been swept by a massive wave. That whole landscape has been recreated. One of the greatest weapons of Rome is weather modifications, and that might be tsunamis, tornadoes, hurricanes, cyclones. They have no remorse against the power of these utensils, and they throw them at us. They still do.
So what do you think that has in relation to the mud floods? I mean, this is the question I've had, and we can see all across almost every continent buildings that have, for some strange reason, buried lower floors. I mean, I know some buildings have been built with basements. I mean, it's just a natural thing. I've worked in basements, so I can't say they were all mud flooded, but this phenomenon known as the mud floods, and we know that with certain resonant frequencies, you can do experiments where you can liquefy something that's been mixed mud, for example. You can pour the water out the mud and it just turns to a liquid. So my question is where is the mud coming from? And I do, I hear it came from the centre, from Meru. I mean, if you're thinking on a slightly flatter version, which I'm very, very much open to myself, it makes far more sense to me. But does this come out of the ground? It must have to come out of the ground somewhere. There must be some kind of frequency to have caused this, and we see this around the world in avalanches and stuff like that, where something causes not just rain, something causes mud to come out of the ground.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So when we look at a landslide or a mud flood today, go to YouTube, type in landslides, or like when the dams are released. What do we say when something doesn't go right? Dam. And so what's dam backwards? It's mad. People have been driven mad without their knowledge, and what's happened is all of the waterways which have natural flow, as nature does, they've all been dammed. Everything's been shut off. The Nile Dam has a very long history of collapsing and wiping out Egypt. Who built the dams? Why are they really just for storing water reservation for the people to use? Who has control to release them? So there's thousands of dams over the last 100 years which have had dam failures, and the whole dam wall collapses, wiping out all the lower villages. So all you need,
coming. Yeah,
there's more coming. So the Aswan Dam in Egypt, just 100 years ago, not even 100 years ago, they doubled the capacity of that. It was one of the biggest dams in the world, and they doubled the capacity of that. So if you look at what happens when a dam, in quote, fails, or when a dam is released, like in Australia in 2011, when they released the dams, and there was a town that was wiped out of Queensland off the map. They had to rebuild it, and they called it Halidon 2.0. They literally called it that. Wow. Halidon was taken away. It was wiped away. And so if we look at how that water travels, when the water moves through a landmass of sand, soil, soft top mass, that travels with the water and it becomes mud. And what we need to look at is
great solvent water.
That's right. So when we look at like dams, the construction of dams, what that is the modification of oceans and riverways, not just the control of riverways, it is the control of oceans and riverways. So what they can do, and I know that they do this, is they control the tides of the oceans. It's not just a lunar-based thing. They've got the knowledge of which waterways move through what currents, and they know that certain oceans they can close off by the amount of salinity in the water. So some of the greatest oceans on the planet that are stopping currents going to other parts of the world have so much saline content that they don't move those currents. So when
they'll be heavier because of that as well.
Yeah. So when Al Gore came out and said New York City will be underwater and all of these countries will be underwater because this current will change, I'm hearing a code. I'm hearing Masonic code, Masonic gesture, because they always make announcement before they bring the show.
Mm.
And
interesting.
I don't have any doubts that I'm not saying that they have full control of the oceans, but they can modify it to do what they wish for it to do. If they can put a layer of ice over a certain continent, which they have, if we look back to the 14th century maps, because Australia was only discovered in 1788 apparently, and we've got cathedrals in England which are 2,000 years old, so they say, which have the art piece of a white cockatoo, or what the original people call a wongalai. So how did they know that these animals existed if they'd never been to Australia,
that goes back to our discussion earlier, these buildings. Yeah.
I believe that any building that is of the context of a cathedral or a temple or a palace that all look like Roman temples, I believe that if they say they were built in any period between 1820 to 1920, and like 50% of them were wiped out by a fire within years of being allegedly built, I believe that when I look at them and I understand architecture, I understand this sort of information, it's very close to my heart. These buildings are over 1,000 years old and they're built to last.
Yeah.
And these are the generators.
They had a different use. These buildings were devices. They drew energy from the ether, and they distributed it. There is so much evidence on so many old photographs that they haven't managed to get to, and Doctor showing this, showing in before, way before even what year was it? I think when Edison invented the light bulb, that there were lights and there was power in some of these buildings.
Well, who would go around at night time after a 2-hour mass and blow out? Who would light 30,000 candles to light one of those buildings up, and who would blow them out? It doesn't make sense. Make sense.
Nothing makes sense.
But if we look at the architecture, we can make sense of what the building is used for. So, for example, every cathedral on the ley lines, on the main energy points of the land, every cathedral,
quite often with water running underneath them as well, underground water,
or beside them, like the Nile, what you were talking about, the Nile Delta.
Yeah.
So if we look at the cathedral architecture and what the building's actually made of, the top points are copper which is what we use to conduct electricity.
Yeah.
And then underneath the spire, the spiral, spiritual, which is all energy, underneath the spire of the cathedral is a mercury ball, which is basically an amplifier to copper. So when we use mercury and copper together, we're using it for conductivity. We're not using it for aesthetics. What we're using it for is conductivity. So starting from the top, we're looking at copper, moving to mercury, moving to the pointed roof of copper, then dropping onto quartz, which is sandstone, which is calcium carbonate, whatever.
Very similar to the pyramids of Giza, where they had the golden capstone and they had what they told us as a sarcophagus. But when they first opened the tomb, the king's chamber, they had a sarcophagus that was filled with mercury that was obviously drained and removed, and the story was changed. But it was another energy device. Yeah.
That's right. And all of the pyramids in the Cairo region, what the original people called Kemet, which is where the word chemistry comes from, because all of the Western chemistry periodic table of elements were drawn up in Egypt. All of those pyramids were coated in alabaster stone, which was also stolen during the Holocaust of Napoleon. So that alabaster is actually used to cool electric devices. So they get really hot. An energy generator gets extremely hot when it's conducting. Look at the size of them. So a massive energy. And
so you're saying that, I mean, I'm agreeing with you that most of these buildings were the same technology on a much smaller scale, and the Tartarian Empire had such a good understanding of this that they built all around the world, and the civilization that was obviously much, much older than we're led to believe or we're taught was completely self creating energy from the ether.
Completely, all divining the land for food, for harmonizing nature, because nature needs a natural equilibrium, and we're the people. We are, call it God's children if you want, but we are here to build equilibrium with nature. We're not here to be the destroyers. So they took nature from us, and they held the code of wisdom away from us, and we don't know what to do anymore. We're like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. We are human beings to just be and be in harmony, and then we come into our way of being, because without that harmony in nature, you cannot be nurtured. If you don't nurture nature, you will not be nurtured.
Well, we're seeing that now. We are seeing that now. Nature is biting back. I just wanted to read something to you. You might have even been looking at the same website earlier. This is a quote from an 1855 source. It said, Tartarian cities, on the third day, we came to the solitude upon an imposing and majestic monument of antiquity, a large city utterly abandoned. Such remains of such cities are no unfrequent occurrence in the deserts of Mongolia, but everything connected with their origin and history is buried in darkness. Oh, what a sadness does a spectacle fill the soul. The ruins of Greece, the superb remains of Egypt, all of these, it is true, tell of death. All belong to the past. Yet when you gaze upon them, you know that they are. You can retrace in memory the revolutions which have occasioned in the ruins and the decay of the country around them. Descended into the tomb wherein was buried alive by the city of Herculaneum. You find there it is a true gigantic skeleton. Now, I just wanted to go to Angkor Wat. We see Angkor Wat in Cambodia. I don't know if it's Tartarian, but this building, which is the remains of a huge city, they've actually done satellite views down from above, which is all overgrown with jungle now. It was it must have held 1 million people, huge waterways, and this antiquitech built into all of the structures there. A lot of them are ruined now, but the main building was obviously something more than a temple. What happened? What caused all of the abandoned cities that we see around the world? And my question to you is we're seeing now so many of these cities repopulated after a date around about 1840. Some are saying a bit in the 17th century. Something happened. Was this mud flood man-made? Were these mud floods man-made? Did they happen all at the same time? And where did the people go? What do you think? What's your take on that?
Well, it's interesting because what we called the Vietnam War, the Cambodians call it the Vietnam-Cambodian War, because there was war in Cambodia and there was war in Vietnam. There was a book written, it's called Dark Shadows over Tibet, and he actually goes into great detail about the Vatican mission that was created in this region that you're asking about, and what was conveyed in this region and what the outcome was. So around 15,000 Cambodian and Vietnamese monks were all exterminated, and all of the tradition of knowledge was taken out of Cambodia and Vietnam, because these people had the great knowledge. They had all of the information that we needed. It's like we're living in a time of history. We're in the middle of the Inquisition. A lot of people say, oh, yeah, remember the Inquisitions? We are in the Inquisition. Since COVID-19 started, whatever you want to call that instance, that is the kickstart of the new Inquisition. And now it's about who's wearing masks and who's not wearing masks. I don't choose to put toxins on my face. I know what's in them. They are toxic. And it's an Inquisition.
So you're saying, the word Inquisition obviously takes me back to the Spanish Inquisition and Torquemada and the terrible things that went on back then. But this organisation, I don't like to call it a religion, but this organisation has gone around the world under the guise of trying to help people with missionaries and systematically destroyed all of the ancient languages, all of the ancient people, all of the people that were connected to the earth. Look at Africa. You know, Africa was a country filled with different tribes and different people connected to the earth. I mean, obviously they were at it, they were warring as well. But look at Australia, look at New Zealand, look at what they tried to do in India, and they succeeded in India. You know, it's not the force it once was. But they've gone around the world and dismantled any connection and released upon it the new human race that they want to use to populate. And when they reduce the amount down to 500 million, as I think is quite obvious,
it actually says on the guidestones
more than remains if they get their way. Yeah.
Under 500 million. So like a lot of people say, you know, they want to reduce the population to 500 million. The guidestones actually state under 500 million. So if we look at legalese and how they write things legally, under 500 million could mean 100,000.
Wow.
So we need to discern that. We need to understand. So that's a big one. That's a really big one, because if they wanted 500 million, they wouldn't have written the word under before that. They're actually stating that it's a lesser amount than that.
So look, we've got half an hour on the show left. So let's get into some because we've really gone deep on this. Is what I loved. I didn't quite know where we'd go with it, but my intuition tells me that the Vatican Church and the Jesuits and the Zionists and the are all connected. There's all a connection there. I hear some say that the Zionists or the ones you're not allowed to talk about were originally the Jesuits were originally from that religion, and they changed and created the Jesuit order. But something that, as I say, intuitively, I feel there's something behind all of it, and I don't think it's human.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the Jesuits, when they conduct their black mass in the Vatican, they are like when we go to the Vatican churches, they are calling on the Holy Spirit, so they call it. So they're calling on something that is not human. So we know that that's out in the open. So that's for the Goyam. There's the Goyam, and then there's the initiated. So one form of there's two doctrines happening in the cathedral. If you go to Sunday church and sit in the temples to witness the worship, you are the Goyam, which in Hebrew means you are the follower.
Even in Catholics, which you're saying Goyam, I thought that just referred to the Torah and the Talmud.
That's right. Well, it's written into the Talmud, the word Goyam. So that's where it would get its derivative from. So when you're the initiated, so there's two doctrines. There's the doctrine of the followers, and then there's the doctrine of the initiated priests. Those initiated priests are actually told how to get to God, and then they go to God, but they're using substance from the jungle, which we're taken away from, and it's the most forbidden substance in the world, mind you. And then, so every time I went to Catholic school, I had this really uncomfortable feeling, and my principal told my parents I needed to go on behavior tablets because I disturbed the class. And that's where my curiosity came from.
You
about
naughty
Rome.
boy.
Naughty boy, right? So my principal, Brother Mark, I call him Brother Mark of the Beast. My principal told me that he went to the Vatican frequently. So I always kept this in connection. So these people who go and visit the Vatican, they have the knowledge of something that was stolen from we the people. And I'm 100% sure, like, that when we've got problems, we always need solutions, and there's always a solution on the back of any problem. We know this. We just need to look for that. So my solution is we need to have a solution. My solution is we need to step out of the beast, and we need to become self-sustainable in a way where we have everything to provide for our family. We don't need to be in the city to do so. Nobody feels good in the city. It's funny, the word citizen. There is no zen in the city. We need to go back to the land, and we need to nurture her in order to be nurtured. There is no one that doesn't have access to land that farms it that is sane. We need to go back to nature.
The thought of living, I grew up in London, and I loved it. I loved that. Some of the greatest times of my life there. But the thought of being there now, I mean, never mind COVID. Obviously, I speak to a lot of people, but I just couldn't even consider living. Going to Brisbane's enough for me. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
You
know what the word Brisbane means?
No.
If you go and if you look at any bus that goes past in Brisbane, that's part of the Brisbane network.
Yeah.
All of those buses have written on them, the New World City. That's been since 15 years ago. That's been written. When you're entering Brisbane, the sign says the New World City of Australia. So I always kept this in my mind because 15 years ago, even I knew about the agenda of the New World. So what does the word Brisbane mean? The bris is what the boy goes through at the age of 13 to become a man, and bane means to banish or to not allow. So what the word Brisbane means is not allowing a boy to become a man. And that is the keystone to what the New World Order is about, is taking rituals away from the people so that they can never find themselves in manhood, in adulthood, in womanhood, because those initiations are important. One of the greatest initiations of woman is becoming a mother. And what they're trying to do now is say that women who breastfeed, this is all in the mainstream headlines on the news, they're saying, we're not calling it breastfeeding anymore. We're calling it gestational mothers. So they're taking away that nature once again. We're going into a new transition.
It's all in the language, the gematria, and the numerology behind the words as well, of course.
Yeah. Demons hide in Jesus' churches. That's all I can say. And we need to step out of those buildings, step out of that system, because the tax system was issued by the Pope in 13th century, where everybody making an income had to pay 10%. That's where the saying 9/10 is 9/10 is the law.
Yeah.
That's where the saying comes from, is the Roman tax system, which today it's like 30-40% depending on what country you're living in. But we didn't change the saying to possession is 3/4 or 3/10 of the law.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to, like where I live here, I live on 10 acres, and I've been working very hard to get my family set up on what we can thrive on and learn in nature. As things are growing, we grow. But when you're in the city without trees, you wonder why it's 20 degrees hotter on the road and everyone's sweating and they're feeling sick and they don't know what the problem is though, because the doctor says maybe you need antidepressants, which are depressants, not knowing that medical system is from the Medici family that owns the media, hence the word media and medicine. The Vatican family, the Medici family, owns the medicine and media industry. And what do you see on the media about medicine in regards to COVID?
Yeah.
We are in the Inquisition. We need to know this, and we need to know it surely. That's not my...
Of course, the medicine and the medical doctors, it's in 7 years of study. Doctors don't study anything on health. They don't. It's not on the list of subjects. They learn about disease and how to manage it using drugs, surgery, and radiation. And we go to, or the majority of people go to those people to get better. I mean, that's madness on its own. But I think that's changing, Adam. I think that there is a massive awakening, especially now. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Is it going to be enough? I believe it will be. I think as long as we all remember that we came here at this time to experience what we're going through. I know it sounds crazy to some people, but those people are completely owned by their attachment to their body and attachment to their gender. When we start to remember.
You dedicate a day of your life for this radio station, and that's a wonderful thing, especially in this day and age. 10 years ago, you'd be a madman. Today, you are respected, and it's a wonderful place we're moving into where more people are awakening. 10 years ago, if you said to somebody, do you know what's in your water? They would never call you to come to the party again because you're that guy that you might change the energy of the party.
I did my show last week. I remember in 2002, a very good friend of mine bought a book home from Australia, and I used to have a recording studio in London. And I told this story last week. I'll keep it short. He asked me to bind this book. He bought all these loose bits of paper back. Can you bind it for me? So I started looking at it. It was a book called The Matrix. I don't know if you heard of it, by Val Valerian. Okay, well, I've got to get a copy of this to you. It will help. Oh, you'll love it. You'll love it. Anyway, I've got it all on PDF, and I was looking in this book, and it was talking about fluoride. It's actually poisonous, and it was talking about how the AIDS virus was man-made, and it's not really a virus, and it would fit. The actual smallest part of it could fit through the microscopic holes in a condom, so there's no way it would protect you anyway, and all of this stuff. And I was like, what the? I said, no, you know what? I had a look at that stuff you gave me, Wayne. There's too many good people in the world for that kind of thing to be true. It could never happen. And that was my take on my first experience of reading something vaguely non-party line. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But yeah, it's like 10 years ago, like you couldn't talk to anybody about this sort of stuff. If you said to somebody, see that plane doing what it's doing, they'd just say like, oh, that's interesting. And they wouldn't put another thought to it. Now, in the position that we're in the Great Awakening, where whether people want to or not, like the Jones theory, what we've called the Jones theory, if your neighbor buys this lawnmower, you'll go out and get a similar lawnmower. If your neighbor's driving this BMW, you want that. It's like this the butterfly effect, or the nature, or the law of attraction. It's we want what we see, and what others desire, we form desire within.
Materialism.
So now that everyone's awakening, the desire to awaken within is being embedded into everyone.
And it's the 100th monkey. It's the 100th monkey's concept of, people are naturally waking up. People are feeling the change in frequency from the people around them.
So yeah, like while all this negative stuff is happening, or whilst people are being negatively impacted or affected, we need to stick to our goals and what we want to do. This instance right now of essential work or non-essential work, we need to I'm not saying that the whole world should be drawn on internet business. However, we know that their directive is to move us into the internet world of business. That's what all the companies are doing, insurance, banking, they're moving everything online, and that's part of a big agenda. We need to find ourselves comfortable within something we can do. So for example, during the start of COVID, I started an internet business of selling medicinal mushrooms, and I don't do it on. I don't put newspaper articles or like post notes on the community boards. Like everything's online, so there's always a solution to what they create as a problem. Yeah. We need to become sustainable for our families, and we need to become rich. I'm not saying economically rich, but we need to have everything we need, because that's how we lived. We had everything we needed. So if we can use the system to get us to where we need to be to exit the system or stay within the system, whatever, my hope is that everybody is satisfied with the life they came to live here in this material world. And it's so easy to have that. Anyone can be rich economically or spiritually. It is so easy. And we need to be surrounded with the right people, the right foods, the right music, the right dance, all of the things that we live in our lives to do, we need to be doing it with joy. So for example, if you're in a relationship or in working somewhere with someone that you don't feel comfortable with, change it, because we're not here to be slaves to anything. We are here to be free, and to live our destiny and to be in peace. And that's all I preach to anybody, is to change what you don't desire, because you're here to fulfill your desires. This world is a wonderful place, and we're here to admire the wonders, and that's the way of being. When people, just to finish off quickly, when people say to me, what is the purpose of being here, Adam? Like, tell me, what's the purpose of, what's behind the sun? The purpose of being here is you can see, you can hear, you can smell, you can touch, you can taste, you can feel. That is all we came here to do. We came here to be witnesses to the grand design and to bear witness of everything that is in the glory of nature. And that is the greatest gift we could ever ask for. So when we're silent and humble and come back to that place, there's nothing that we need to do other than to be in peace. And that's what life's about.
Love it.
Turn off the news.
Yeah.
Turn off all of that
distractions.
crap.
Yeah.
That's right. So give me any problem.
Reconnect. I mean, you know, there is so much space. We're told there are too many people on the earth. It's been ingrained on us for decades. There are too many people, overpopulation. I mean, even people on this station say it. Not all of them, but a few people I've heard actually falling for the fact that they believe there's too many people on the planet. This plane we live on is so immense. There is
I'll tell you,
more than enough for everybody.
That's right. I'll tell you one thing about Australia. There is less people living in the land of Australia than there was before the Vatican came with the mission to invade and dominate and destroy and decimate culture. There was more than 30 million original people living in the tribes all across the land.
Wow.
Now there's 24 million people living in Australia in only 10% of the land. And they say, yeah, but inland Australia, there's no water. The whole of Australia can be tapped into for water. All of it.
Yeah, it's the huge artesian basin, of course. There's masses of water
just
here.
That's just one of them. And then you've got the Perth Basin. You've got there's 5 major basins in Australia, and the Artesian Basin runs through New South Wales and Victoria. But if you actually, like, it really shames me that there isn't a map of all the basins put together, because then we would see that it's all underground water. But if you look up all the basins and get the 5, 6, 7 different maps of all the basins, you'd be hard pressed to find a part of Australia that doesn't have water underneath it.
Yeah, well. So I mean, an interesting analogy that someone, I think it was actually Max Egan, he worked out the square footage of the entire planet, and how much an individual or a couple would need to live on and grow food, just enough. I think it's half an acre, and it worked out that the entire population of 7.5 billion people, if you gave every single one of those people half an acre of land, you could fit every human being in in Australia, and there would be in Queensland, and there would be no one else on the earth at all.
Yeah.
Oh, was it Queensland? Sorry, no, I made a mistake there. My mistake. You could fit everybody in Australia, every single person, and there would be no one in Queensland or rest of the world. which is it's a very good way of understanding how much we've been lied to. People are spread out all over the place, but there is still so much space on the plane. So
it's a lot of land they don't show on the maps. So
yeah,
just if you go to Fraser Island, I hope you do this, because this is what I want you to do. Okay. If you go to the map and go to Fraser Island, zoom in on the map, and then you don't have to do it now, sorry. And then you can zoom out of Fraser Island and you'll see all of the ocean is airbrushed. So you can't even see the ocean. However, even the common fisherman knows, and I'm from Australia, like I grew up in Queensland right near Fraser Island. So this is knowledge that I want to bring to the world. All of the islands surrounding Fraser Island are all inhabited by still tribal Aboriginal people. And you know not to drive your boat through there, because they've got their own laws where if you come through their borders, they can intercept you off your boat, they can take your boat, and they can do whatever they want to you. That's not that's not me trying to put fear into anybody, but they've been given designated land under sovereign law that entitles them to be where they're being. However,
It's just common
This
knowledge.
is not common knowledge because they've even wiped this land off the map. You can't even see it. And this is there's a multitude of islands. There's like hundreds of islands with these people living on it. And fishermen do not go there. Fishermen do not go there because it's common knowledge in the area that you do not go there because you either have your boat taken off you. And these people have boats. These people have technology.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like there's most of what we're seeing on the maps, they've wiped out all of the important stuff which breaks away the code. So like if you go down to Tasmania, you can see a lot of the land mass in the ocean. They're all cut down tree stumps. They're huge, giant trees of ancestry. And you just think that's an island. But around that area, you go to, what's it called? Organ Pipes National Park. Those organ pipes are all an ancient tree system, and that's why they're all made of hexagonal basalt columns, which are the fibers that send the nutrients up the plant. You don't even know. You don't even need to know plant anatomy to know that. Like it's just common.
Well, it's very common around here in general. I mean, we see how fast you can. I mean, I saw a video, an article the other day on a steel ladder that had the actual top 4 or 5 rungs of the ladder that was in a cave system, and I forget where it was now, but the bottom half of it had been completely petrified and covered in limestone. And this must have happened very quickly because the ladder was relatively new, the last couple of 100 years at least. But how does something turn to stone so quickly? And again, it changes everything we're taught. There's so much evidence of flat top mountains that were obviously trees at some point. And then we could go into another completely different subject of the real shape and size of this plane we live on. But it's another whole show there.
just off something I was saying earlier about like you don't get to chop and choose between government knowledge and original knowledge. If you look at the original name of what the tribal people that inhabited the land of these places, what the original name that they call these, what you and I would refer to as ancient trees that have been cut down, they all mean in their language something that in the etymology refers to an ancient living tree. So, for example, Devil's Tower in Wyoming, the name that the Dakota Indians call that by is large ancient tree. And they actually all know as a tribe that all of those tree roots connect to any smaller tree, which you can, like you said, we can go into this on a whole new level, but it's there. Like the original knowledge is still here, and we're in the parts of history. It's such an interesting time of history where we're witnessing them just wipe out the last bit of our roots that take us to serenity. So we've got a battle to fight, and it's whether you want the truth and nothing but the truth, the true truth, or if you want to just lay down and fall to the subservience of the system that threw us overboard 500 years ago.
Yes. So you think 500 years ago is when it really started stepping up?
I think so, yeah. It was around 500 years ago. That's when sort of like the Jesuits came on with their big, like the Counter-Reformation. Every book, the Jesuits are actually employed by the Vatican to go into bookstores and to remove any book on the Reformation or the Counter-Reformation of Rome, which was when everybody rose up and everybody in the 16th century said Rome is performing all of the indulgences of the planet, making everybody commit adultery. It's written into Revelations. They made everyone throw their Bibles in the fire, and then they rewrote it so that you couldn't find that about the Vatican written into there.
Gosh.
So,
I mean, so much happened around that time. I mean, you have the whole, Galileo and Copernicus story, and the distractions were. Yeah,
Father Copernicus, Father Galileo, they're all Vatican priests. So like anything that Galileo said and anything Copernicus said, I will find the opposite of it, because Copernicus and Galileo are agents of the Vatican that were changing the system of, I'll be honest. I'll be completely honest. Not that I haven't been throughout this whole conversation. There is not a chance in this world that I believe we are going around the sun. I'm going to stick with the ancient tribes. I'm going to keep to the original knowledge, and I'm going to not believe, but I'm going to know with great strength that everything revolves around the earth. And that is how Earth is.
Motionless plane.
Earth is the center point of existence in the material plane, and it's the only place in the world where material matter can be permeated. Hence why the word earth and heart are the same. They're an anagram. Heart and earth are an anagram of each other, a rearrangement of letters of the same word, because the etymology of the word heart means center point. And heart chakra is the center meridian of the body.
Heart of the matter.
And when you say the heart of the matter is to get to the center of the matter. We know that when you say the heart of Africa, you're going to the middle of Africa. So the heart is the center of the body. The earth is the center of the universe, and it is knowledge that the original people had. I'm not just like, I didn't watch a 2 minute or 2 hour or 2 day documentary. I've done extensive research on what the original people know. So yeah, we know that the earth is the center of the universe. And where does that saying come from? You think the earth revolves around you, don't you? I do. Because that makes living much more spiritual. It brings us into sentiment of the caterpillar to the butterfly. What is next? What is next? So there's so many big things that have been destined for all of us. And I'm not talking church talk. I'm talking real man talk, real woman talk, real people talk. We are here to be divine. What's the next step? Are you ready for that? Then get into being, come into your place of spirituality and find yourself doing what you need to be doing. Because if you're a caterpillar with no legs running around, not knowing where to put your cocoon, what's going to be left for you? You're going to be left to the birds.
You're going to let a witch eat you up. You're going to get eaten.
Yeah, I'm not getting eaten. I'm going to the butterfly stage.
So let's go back. Let's go back to this land on the ground again a little bit, because this is this could be another show we'll do in the future, Adam. Where is Lithuania in regards to the level of consciousness with regards to people? Either are they wearing masks? Are they rolling their sleeves up in mass? Is there any people questioning the narrative out there?
Well, what I will say is all of the countries that are wearing masks,
the I-5.
All of the countries that are wearing masks, I wish I could get into the mindset of all people, but society has been taken in a way where everybody's ready to bow down at any moment. And this is a test. This is a test to see how subservient people are to the system to do what they're told to do. And you and I know that first comes the lockdown restrictions, then comes the masks, and then comes what? It's all implementationary. It's all slow move. And they're not going to introduce a mandatory vaccination straight away. You've got to slowly move the minds to take the mandatory this and that. So everyone in Lithuania is wearing their mask.
Wow.
Like if I can't get entry to somewhere that you must wear a mask, I have a scarf. I won't put that fiber over my face. I know what's in it. They are using chemicals that are sedatory. They sedate you, and it's the same chemicals that formulate for sodium fluoride, which is a sedative.
Nanofibers as well, and also
I don't have anything to do with that.
Fiberglass and fiberglass particles in there. I mean, it's just shocking, absolutely shocking.
Creepy.
I'm quite surprised though. There is a really big, not an uprising, but there is a very, very obvious change of heart over here. I mean, there's obviously people that are still fully sucking it up and believing everything the government's telling them, but there is over this side, I live on probably the most unvaccinated part of Australia, and they've already been playing their games with the weather here specifically, and I think also they had a scare just before Blues Fest, one of the biggest festivals in the country. They let the whole thing get set up. They let all the food people turn up, and the day of the event, there was a mystery nurse that apparently got tested and didn't go and isolate herself, and happened to go shopping to every major shopping place and bar in Byron Bay. So of course they had to shut the whole area down, and they cancelled the festival, put loads of people out of business.
Oh, so, you sound like a conspiracy theorist. Are you? Come on, just don't question anything you're told. Just eat it, then if you live, you live. I'm just staring at you. Come on, mate. I go shopping at every shopping centre that would have to lock the whole country down for one certain event. Like, they know what they're doing. They know how to get everybody up in arms to be the, the Stockholm syndrome where you fall in love with your captor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
So people have become babies to the government. They're like, if you say something rude about someone's parents, righteously and rightfully so, they should defend that. But what everybody's doing is they're defending with the government their enemy, because the word government in Latin means mind control. That's what it means. That's what the word government means.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The direct meaning, and of course reminds me of the part in the Matrix where he says, "Look, these people are your enemy. These people are so indoctrinated. They will fight you to keep the narrative." This is exactly where we are. So listen, Adam, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on the show. It's 3 minutes on the show left. I'd like to
Can I sing a song for the last 3 minutes?
Why don't you give us your website address quickly?
I'm just joking. I don't want to sing a song.
I was going to let you do it, mate. I was going to let you do it.
All right.
Why don't you give us your website address quickly?
So if you want to find me on Facebook, it's just type in Adam Lewington, and our shop is closed until August. That's when the picking season occurs. So reindeeramanita.com. But find me on Facebook, Adam Lewington, and I post a lot of my main material on there. So don't be hesitant to reach out. I've got time in the world.
No problem, mate. No problem. The music's coming now. Thank you so much. Listen, I'll talk to you later on chat, and thank you so much for a fantastic introduction to your knowledge.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Take care, mate.
Yeah.